Hello. Welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me to your conference. It's been an excellent conference so far. I'm coming from a very different angle to your conference. I'm an orthodontist. My BDS is your equivalent to an MD, I think. I came in England. I went into my MSc, so I specialized in orthodontics in Denmark. You could, in a way, call this presentation Ancestral Orthodontics. I think it's important with anything to ask, where are we today? 95% of us have deviations in our dental alignment. 30+% are recommended orthodontic treatment, and of that, half to a quarter of those are recommended premolar extractions. Nearly half of all wisdom teeth are removed. Now, we need to compare that to Paleo Man, who had 95% well-aligned teeth, broad dental arches, with well-developed faces showing tribal similarity. We have had almost a sea change. Can anyone see that? Yes. Well, better than me. It's almost like we've become a different mammal. We've forgotten where we've come from. There's been a big change. Now, we should have horizontal growth like this. And what we're getting is vertical growth like this. Weston Price and others described exactly this happening. It's as if our faces are melting down. We're a waxwork model. We've put a little bit too close to the fire, and it's dropping down. Now, of interest to note in this is how the angle of the mandible changes. It doesn't matter how much I move my head around, my angle of my mandible won't smack my throat. That's quite important. Now, we look at the overall length of a mandible. It hasn't changed during this change in facial form. However, the dental bearing area has changed quite dramatically. It's specifically changed in the area of the wisdom teeth and the area of the incisors, which is where we're seeing the dental orthodontic problems today. In 3D, this whole face is narrowing, as described by Weston Price. Now, research by Thailander and Sweden shows that every single skull found 1,000 years ago that had wisdom teeth working and in function. Pick anyone out of the bush in Africa or out of the jungle in the Amazon, and they will have a space behind their wisdom teeth. Now, if you have no chin in the horizontal direction, your tongue is going to be in your airway. Now, we have a major change in the human facial skeleton in the blink of an evolutionary eye. Now, the images on the left are people who are largely unaffected, and the images on the right are people who are largely affected. Most of you probably occupy a middle ground. Now, that group on the left, they're the 5% who aren't affected. The rest of you account for that 90% who are affected. It's now almost as if affected people are normal, and we can no longer see the woods for the trees. The faces are dropping down. As the face drops down, the tongue is pushed in the airway. That's uncomfortable. You then respond in various different ways. Vincent is describing the classical pattern. As the face drops down, it goes down balanced. Margaret's describing the classical Anglo-Saxon. As the face drops down, the bottom jaw drops down more. And Richard's demonstrating the classical Asian pattern, by this we mean Japanese, Chinese, where as the face drops down, the mandible gets longer. But these are all vertical changes described with different patterns, maybe due to your genetic predisposition. I'm not describing why. Now, but what I am describing is a syndrome. This is my conservative estimation of the effects of your face getting longer. But primarily, faces that aren't the right shape don't work correctly. You get breathing problems. As your tongue comes into your throat, you're more likely to get sleep apnea. You're more likely to get snoring. As the face lengthens, it's narrowing. There's less horizontal space for the teeth. And the airway is affected, which is leading to snoring. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a bit confused. Snoring, sleep apnea, and of course, more blocked noses. In my training as an orthodontist, I spent some time in an ENT department, that's an ear, nose, and throat department. As I would walk into the ear, nose, and throat department, I would see the children sitting waiting for their appointments. These were the very same facial types I would see waiting for orthodontic treatment. Many of them, in fact, were the same facial people, were the same people waiting that I saw in my orthodontic department. It's a very similar type of people. Also, these are the people who are getting jaw joint problems. These are the people who are getting that typical adenoid face and losing their tribal uniformity, as Weston Price did describe. Now, we can break the groups into the group treating this, or looking at this issue, basically into the genetic group and to the environmental groups, depending on what you believe. Of course, you've got the orthodontists in this group here. They admit they don't know what causes crooked teeth. It's widely recognized in the textbooks that they don't know the cause. However, they say it's multifactorial. That's a classic modern excuse. They've missed the vertical issue. They've missed this vertical drop down. Many of you must be aware of the x-rays orthodontists take when they make an assessment. These x-rays are based on normative data from when they first did these x-rays in the 60s. Now, in the 60s, was facial profile, facial shape normal? I'd argue not. But this is the normative data we're using on your children. Now, if you look at indigenous tribes alive today, if you look at the 5% of people with naturally occurring perfect malocclusions, occlusions, if you look at the models, the most attractive faces, these groups are very similar, but they're not the same as our X-ray norms. They're much more same as the ideals that I described earlier. So we have this discontinence between norms and ideals. Now, if we look at Weston Price, who was looking at people with these facial shape changes, he was considering it a prenatal injury, and he suspected it may be due to vitamin A and vitamin D. Now, I'm within the orthotropic community. I feel it's probably from a change in muscle tone, a change in tongue posture, and a change in tongue function. Now, before I came here, I went on to some web forums to get people from the Paleolithic and the Weston Price Foundation's opinions of what were causing this problem. I was asking around about vitamin A and vitamin D. because that's what Weston Price was suspecting. I was asking for hard evidence, and I haven't really found hard evidence. Weston Price suspected it. He made it as a suspicion. Now, here on the left is a map of the deficiency of vitamin A in the world. Now, it's very interesting that North America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand are some of the countries that don't have a vitamin A deficiency, yet those are the very countries with the worst level of malocclusion. Doesn't really add up that it could be a vitamin A deficiency. Now, I don't know if you know, but Australia has one of the highest levels of skin cancer. And because of that, they must be getting quite a lot of vitamin D. And yet, they have quite a high level of malocclusion. And so they're an Anglo-Saxon community that's now in Australia. They should have less vitamin D, but they don't have they have the same level of malocclusion. Now also, if we look at malnutrition and malocclusion, it doesn't seem to be related. Now I do most of my consultations just looking at faces, not looking at the teeth. The child in the bottom centre there has fairly good facial form, but obvious problems with bone formation. So I don't think rickets and vitamin D deficiency are related, and malocclusion is related. What I think is more likely is muscle usage, the tongue and mandible position, and the swallowing pattern. I think the first two have better evidence, and they're more related to the shape of the face. The last one is more related to the position of the teeth. Now, muscle usage, this person has muscular dystrophy. This is a disease of the muscles, not the bones, and it's causing a gross change in facial shape. This person has their teeth together, and yet that's an image of what normal is. As I said, I don't think that's ideal, but that's an image of norm. This gentleman had late onset muscle weakness, and he's got gross change in his facial shape. Now, we have changed massively our effort to gain calories. How much effort does it take to take a soda down? And how many calories do you gain from it? I estimate we're doing about 5% of the effort of eating now that we did in the past, and that's before you consider non-nutritional exercise of the jaws. If I want a leather coat, I can buy a leather coat. If Paleo Man wanted a leather coat, he had a lot of chewing. Now, this is a normal level of wear, and it has been for the last 200,000 years. We are abnormal. Now, if you have a blocked nose, what are you going to do? You either die or you open your mouth and lower your tongue. You don't have any other options. This child got a total nasal obstruction after this photograph. It's dramatically changed how his face has grown. Most young children, as infants, are getting blocked noses for one reason or another. They're changing their posture. It's becoming permanent. These are two types of experiments that were done. One done simply placing a piece of plastic in the roof of the mouth, making it uncomfortable to place the tongue in the roof of the mouth. You're getting a gross increase in facial height. These monkeys had the muscles pulled further back, reattached, causing a more bite. That's caused a reduction in the facial height. You've got experiments in both directions. That's good science. Now, orthodontic treatment. Every orthodontic study I have ever seen against controls has shown an increase in facial height. So we are treating symptoms, but we are worsening the underlying problem. That's bad medicine. Now, this is a set of identical twins. I would suggest the twin on the lower has less of a well-placed mandible than his brother above. Incidentally, twins have the greatest facial variation in their bodies, in their faces. Now, he was given orthotropic treatment, and that dramatically changed the way his face grew. Now, if we take these two girls, the girl on the left, she's going to have less straight teeth than the girl on the right. She's going to have more breathing problems than the girl on the right. She's going to have more ear, nose, and throat problems than the girl on the right. And she's going to breathe easier. Now, I'd like you to ask you, what do you think her posture? Which girl do you think has the best posture? The girl on that side or the girl on this side? The girl on this side. Now, I was very impressed yesterday with Esther Gochau's presentation. I doubt she stands as well as some of the slides that Esther showed yesterday, but she stands better. And there's a debate in the profession about the ascending and the descending. And I think if you can get people to posture better, they will get better facial growth. But that is an argument for another day. And I am better looking than I was 7 years ago. That is hard work and effort. I think it's probably more difficult than staying on a Paleolithic diet. But it's possible. If you look at someone like Stephen Hawkins, whose face went wrong at a late age, you should be able to make your face grow right at a late age. All of my dental nurses have looked better when I've met up with them, well, over a 5 to 10 year period. I'm amazed how many of you, someone like Keith Norris, who has great body, but tends to hang his mouth open. A lot of work in one area, but not so much work in another area. Now, it is relatively simple. You have to have your lips together, teeth together or near together, and tongue on the roof of your mouth. That is it. It's not more complex. If you were like the characters in Matrix, and I could plug you in and program that into you, you would get good facial growth. There was nothing specially genetic about those faces I showed you on the left far side of the slide. They learnt to do that naturally. That wasn't in their genes. Now, I challenged the British orthodontists to a debate on what causes crooked teeth. This is one area where we can have a specific debate with good research in peer-reviewed quality journals. Because when we have a debate like this, we can come to a definitive conclusion, we can draw a line in the sand and move forward. Now, my point of presenting to you here is to say, if you're scientists, if you believe in the truth, you need to support me in this debate. That's how science moves forwards. We are treating 1/3 of the population of all westernized civilizations with a method where we admit we don't know what causes it. And we are avoiding open debate. And so here's my Facebook site that you can write down and join. And here are the websites that I recommend you go and visit. And I recommend lips together, teeth together, tongue on the roof of your mouth. Okay. Now, I don't know if we've got time for any questions. Do we? Who's in charge? We do. Now, can we not have anecdotal case study questions? We've got a comment about you and your family. I'll be afterwards down by the coconut water stand in the chairs down there, and you can ask me about you and your family and friends. Just general questions.
So general question on the posture that you just prescribed. The tongue on the roof of the mouth, is it flat on the roof of the mouth or is it curved? Because in orthodontics, they used to talk about tongue thrusting.
The full section of your tongue. For some reason, if you pull a cheesy smile when you swallow, the back of your tongue goes up. I don't know why, but it's worthwhile. Interestingly, physiotherapists do that when they're teaching people deep cervical neck exercises, because the posterior third of the tongue is related to the deep cervical postural centers. I could go on about that, but...
My second question was on the orthotropic intervention for children, what's the age range of efficiency for that?
If I'm going to treat a child and I'm going to get a good result, I want to cut off at 9 years old. 6 years old to 9 years old, optimal 7 or 8 is when I want to get in.
Thank you.
Question. So I was impressed when I read the Weston Price book several years ago. It's dramatic when you look at the different phases pre and post, intervention with the Western diet.
Yes.
So you ruled out vitamin A and vitamin D, but how do you explain the differences? It's certainly not just that one group had better posture or kept their tongue on the roof of the mouth, is it? Or is that the explanation? So how do you explain that a whole population had this habit and then they changed the habit after they started
Price
eating?
was a product of his environment. He saw these changes. He was greatly influenced by Mellanby, who had come out with vitamin D deficiency and rickets. It made sense. Bendy bones not growing right, faces not growing right, the diet changing. Well, that was it. But he didn't look at the hardness of the diet. This is paleo-light. You are in the paleo-light movement. I went to the wellness food exhibition over here, and they're saying they're even making some of those products softer for people. Weston Price missed hardness of the food. We have gone from a very hard diet to a very soft diet. We had most of our food calories used to come from hard things. We've introduced all of these carbohydrates. They're soft to eat. They're highly nutritious. We're not making that effort anymore. I'm sorry. Yes, eat good food, but eat hard food.
Thank you.
And by the way, it is a mix. It's the two things. It's a lowered tongue posture, and it's weak muscles. So we have gone from this to this. It's evident around. I'm sorry, standing here watching you, a lot of you have got your mouths open. If you've got your mouth open, where are you growing? Sorry, another question, I think. Oh, yeah, sorry.
So I was just going to say, it seemed interesting, the people you showed on the left, the models, well, first of all, they don't do a lot of talking. That's one thing. So,
I don't think it's talking that's making that exercise.
well, so that's what I was going to ask you, though. You're saying to keep your mouth closed and lips together and tongue on the roof, but it's like, so how does chewing come into play in terms of frequency and the difficulty, and then also just talking and socializing if people do that mostly throughout the day?
Yeah, some of these detailed specifics we can't know much about. The problem with looking at tongue posture is the fact that how can you look at the position of the tongue without affecting the position of the tongue? Whether it's the tongue up there 100% of the time, whether it's the tongue up there at momentary important swallow moments, whether it's the tongue up there, we don't know exactly. We need to research this, but how can you research it without looking in there? I mean, I think some people are putting people in MRI scanners, but I don't think that's a very normal environment to be in, to have a normal posture.
Thanks for the presentation. What's your luck with resolving obstructive sleep apnea with this?
It's something I personally haven't focused on. I've got members of our community in California and in Chicago, and recently they've pulled a couple of subjects out of surgery and CPAP. Because if you put CPAP on someone, you are just putting the last nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I
because
use
that
one.
will just pull the face back like that.
Yeah, especially in kids.
Yeah, oh, yeah, disaster. You'll banana their face fairly quickly.
Thank you.
And if you want any more questions, I'll be out by the second pool of chairs